When my neighbor handed me a glass of wine and said, "It only gets better with age," I didn't expect her to look me in the eye and ask if I did too. That was the night everything between us began to change. I had only been living in the neighborhood for a week when I first met her. It was a quiet street, lined with maples that dropped their leaves like golden confetti across the sidewalks. I remember that evening clearly. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain that hadn't quite fallen yet. I was walking back from the grocery store, arms overloaded with bags, trying not to let the carton of eggs slip free. That's when I heard a calm voice behind me. "Careful, looks like you're one step away from a disaster." I turned and saw her. My neighbor. She looked to be in her early 40s, graceful in the way she carried herself, not trying to impress anyone, just quietly confident. Her dark hair was pulled into a loose knot at the back of her neck, strands falling free in a way that made her look effortlessly elegant. She was dressed simply, a soft sweater and jeans, but somehow she seemed more put together than I ever did, even on my best days. She stepped closer, steadying one of the bags that tilted dangerously from my arm. For a moment, her hand brushed mine. Just a small touch, but it sent a surprising warmth through me, as if her calm presence had slipped under my skin before I had the chance to resist it. "Here," she said, "let me take one." I should have refused, told her I was fine, but there was something disarming about the ease in her voice. So I handed her the bag, watching as she carried it with no sign of effort. We walked together toward my front door, and I felt strangely aware of how quiet the street had become, only the crunch of leaves under our steps and the sound of her soft laughter when I admitted I'd underestimated how heavy groceries could feel after a long day. At my doorstep, she handed the bag back. Her smile lingered, gentle but unreadable. "You're the new one on the block," she said, tilting her head just slightly, like she was studying me. I was wondering when we'd meet. I nodded, fumbling with my keys, suddenly feeling far younger than I was. "Yeah, just settling in." She gave the kind of smile that doesn't ask for more explanation, only offers understanding. And then she stepped back, her eyes holding mine for a second longer than necessary. "I live just over there," she said, pointing to the house across the street. "Don't be a stranger." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there with groceries cutting into my arms and a strange, unsettled feeling blooming in my chest. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning. The first spark in what would become a fire I never expected to find, a connection that would change the way I saw not only her, but myself. It was a Friday evening when I heard the knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. My life was still in that unsettled stage of unpacking, where half my things were in boxes and the rest scattered across the living room like I hadn't figured out what home was supposed to look like yet. When I opened the door, there she was, my neighbor. This time, not in jeans and a sweater, but in a simple black blouse, sleeves rolled up, hair loose around her shoulders. In her hands, she held a bottle of red wine. "I thought you could use a proper welcome," she said. Her smile was soft, a little teasing, like she knew she was catching me off guard. "It's tradition on the street, or at least, I've decided it should be." I laughed awkwardly, stepping aside. "I can't say no to that." She followed me in, and suddenly my cluttered living room felt smaller, the air shifting just because she was in it. She looked around without judgment, her eyes moving over the stacks of books and unopened boxes, and instead of making me self-conscious, it felt like she was quietly approving, like she saw me for what I was, not the mess. We ended up carrying the wine out to her porch instead. She had set up a small table with 2 chairs, string lights glowing faintly above us, casting everything in a golden haze. The air was cooler now, the kind of evening that makes you want to sit still and listen to the night. She poured the wine with a steady hand, sliding a glass toward me. When I took it, her fingers brushed mine. Just a whisper of contact, but enough to make me feel like the moment slowed down. She swirled her glass, lifted it toward me, and with that same playful smile said, "You know, wine gets better with age. The older it is, the richer it becomes. The more depth it holds." I smiled back, trying not to overthink her words, but then she tilted her head slightly, eyes catching mine in a way that made my pulse skip. "Do you think people are the same?" she asked softly. Do we get better with age too? The question lingered between us, heavier than the wine in my glass. I could have laughed it off, given her some quick, clever answer, but something in her eyes stopped me. There was mischief there, yes, but also something more. A vulnerability she wasn't trying to hide. I took a sip, letting the rich, velvety taste sit on my tongue before I answered. I think some people do, I said carefully. Some people carry time like a weight. Others, like a gift. Her smile deepened, not broad, not exaggerated, just warm, as if I'd passed some unspoken test. And for the rest of the night, we talked. About little things, big things, nothing at all. But every laugh we shared, every pause between words, felt like it was carrying us closer to something I didn't yet have the courage to name. Over the next few weeks, her porch became a kind of quiet refuge for me. Sometimes she'd wave me over when she saw me outside. Other times I'd find myself walking across the street with no plan other than hoping she might invite me to sit. And she always did. Those evenings blurred together in the best way. We'd sit under the same string lights, sipping wine or coffee depending on the mood. At first, the conversation stayed light: neighbors, work, the little quirks of the street. But little by little, we peeled back layers. One night, I remember her leaning back in her chair, gazing out into the dark. Her voice was steady, but softer than usual when she said, "It's strange. You can live somewhere for years and still feel alone." She laughed quietly, almost to herself, shaking her head. I guess that's what happens when you spend too much time convincing yourself you don't need anyone. I didn't know what to say at first. There was something raw in the way she admitted it, not dramatic, not seeking pity, just honest. And I could feel the weight of that honesty settling between us like a fragile glass. So I told her the truth too. About how I'd been drifting, unsure of what I wanted to do with my life. About the pressure I felt to have everything figured out, when most days I didn't even know where I wanted to be tomorrow. She turned her head toward me then, studying me with those steady eyes. "You're harder on yourself than you should be," she said. "Trust me, time has a way of showing you that." For a moment, I felt younger than ever sitting across from her, but not in a belittling way. More like she carried a perspective I hadn't yet earned. And instead of feeling out of place, I felt drawn in. That night, something subtle shifted. She moved her chair just a little closer, so close that when we both leaned forward to laugh at some silly story I told, our knees brushed under the table. It was such a small thing, but I felt it. The press of her warmth against me, steady and unintentional, yet powerful in the way it lit something inside me. I didn't move my leg away. And neither did she. We carried on talking, but the air felt different after that. Every pause in our words seemed to stretch a little longer, every glance held just a little more weight. By the time I stood to leave, I realized I wasn't just looking forward to the next evening. I was craving it. Not the wine, not the lights, not even the comfort of her porch. It was her. The way her voice slowed when she shared something true. The way her eyes softened when she looked at me. It was the kind of connection you don't plan for. The kind you don't even notice at first, until it's already wrapped itself around you, drawing you in, one quiet night at a time. It was late one evening when the storm rolled in. I'd been sitting at my desk, pretending to get work done, but mostly listening to the wind push against the windows. The sky cracked open with a streak of lightning, followed quickly by the low rumble of thunder. And then, just like that, the power blinked out. For a moment, the silence felt almost too heavy. No hum of appliances, no light, just the steady pounding of rain on the roof. I glanced across the street through the wet glass of my window. Her house was dark too. Before I could think too much about it, I grabbed my jacket and crossed the street. The rain soaked me quicker than I expected, cool drops sliding down my neck. When she opened the door, candlelight flickered behind her, softening the sharp edges of the night. "You okay?" I asked, a little breathless from the run. She gave me that calm smile, holding a candle in one hand. "I was just about to ask you the same thing. Come in before you drown out there." Her living room was lit only by candles she'd scattered across tables and shelves. The shadows danced along the walls, wrapping the room in something that felt both mysterious and comforting. She had already pulled a blanket onto the couch, and when she gestured for me to sit, I didn't hesitate. The storm raged outside, but in there, it felt like the world had paused. She sat down beside me, closer than usual, and without a word, pulled the blanket so it covered us both. At first, I was too aware of the simple things: the faint crackle of the wick, the steady tap of rain against the window, the warmth of the fabric brushing against my hand. And then, her shoulder pressed lightly against mine, and it was such a small point of contact, but it sent a ripple through me. The scent of her lavender, mixed with the faint trace of wine from earlier that evening, seemed to anchor me in place. We didn't talk much. Just sat there, listening. Every so often, lightning would flash through the window, painting her face in silver light, and I'd catch myself staring. She looked softer in the candlelight, not guarded, not teasing, just quietly present. At one point, she adjusted the blanket and her hand brushed against my arm. Not intentional, maybe, but the warmth of her skin lingered long after the touch itself. I wanted to say something. Anything. But the words felt too fragile, like speaking them would shatter the stillness that had settled between us. So I just breathed and listened and let myself feel the quiet closeness of that moment, the storm raging outside, and the strange, unspoken storm beginning to build inside me. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just a neighbor sitting on her couch. I was someone who wanted to stay. The storm didn't let up for hours. We stayed there, side by side on the couch, the blanket pulled over us, as if it was the only barrier between us and the wild night outside. The candles had burned lower, their flame softer now, glowing like quiet secrets in the dark. We had been talking, stories, little confessions, laughter that came easily, but as the night stretched on, our words began to thin. The silences grew longer, heavier, not uncomfortable, but weighted with something neither of us dared to name. At one point, I turned my head to find her already looking at me. Her eyes didn't dart away. They stayed. Steady, searching. My chest tightened under the quiet intensity of it, and for a moment, it felt like the whole world had narrowed down to that single gaze. She lifted her hand then, slowly, as if pulled by something beyond choice. I felt my breath catch before she even reached me. Her fingers hovered near my face, trembling just slightly in the faint glow. And in that moment, I wanted nothing more than to close the small distance, to let her touch erase the boundary that still held us apart. But she stopped, her hand freezing midair. A nervous laugh slipped from her lips, soft and self-conscious. She lowered her hand as though she'd reached too far. "I'm sorry," she whispered, almost to herself. "I don't know what I was," she trailed off, shaking her head. Before she could retreat further, I caught her hand. Gently. Not forcing, just holding. Her skin was warm, her fingers delicate against mine. For a second, she looked down at our hands as though they weren't hers anymore, as though she couldn't quite believe the contact was real. Her eyes lifted back to mine, wide and uncertain, but she didn't pull away. The silence that followed was different from before. Not empty, but alive. My heartbeat was loud in my chest, and I could feel hers too, faint, but steady, through the pulse of her wrist where my thumb rested. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. The closeness itself felt almost unbearable, like a secret just on the edge of being spoken. Every second stretched, suspended in that fragile balance between restraint and surrender. Finally, she exhaled, leaning back slightly, though her hand remained in mine. "You have this way of making me forget I'm supposed to be careful," she said softly. Her words settled in me like an echo, and I realized I felt the same. She wasn't just my neighbor anymore. She wasn't just a beautiful woman I admired from across the street. She was becoming something far more dangerous and far more precious. And in that quiet, candlelit room, with the storm raging outside, I knew something had changed even if neither of us had said the words out loud. The storm eventually began to fade. The thunder rolled further into the distance, and the rain softened against the windows until it was just a steady hush, like the world was finally exhaling. The candles were burning low now, their light dim but steady, and in that hush, something inside me calmed too. We were still sitting close, the blanket warm around us. Her hand was still in mine. Neither of us had spoken for several minutes, but the silence wasn't sharp anymore. It was gentler, almost protective, as if it was giving us space to feel everything without the need for words. I glanced at her, and she was watching the flicker of the candle on the table. Her expression wasn't guarded or playful this time. It was open, vulnerable, like she was letting me see a version of herself she didn't often share. When she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet I almost missed it. "I haven't let anyone this close in a long time." The words hung there, fragile, like she was afraid they might break if she said them too loudly. I tightened my hold on her hand, not to keep her from pulling away, but to let her know I heard her. That I understood. She turned toward me then, slowly, her eyes searching mine. And after a long pause, she leaned in, not to kiss me, not to close that last distance, but simply to rest her head against my shoulder. The moment her cheek touched me, I felt everything shift. Her hair brushed against my jaw, soft and faintly scented with lavender. Her weight was gentle but grounding, like she was finally allowing herself to let go. My chest rose and fell beneath her, and I became acutely aware of the rhythm of her breathing, steadying itself against mine. I didn't move. I didn't need to. Just being there, holding that closeness, felt more intimate than anything else could have. After a while, she spoke again, her words muffled against me. "It scares me," she admitted. "Letting someone in. Feeling this, at my age, after everything." She gave a faint, shaky laugh, as though trying to disguise the truth in her confession. I lowered my head slightly, so my voice was close to her ear when I answered. "It scares me too," I said. "But maybe that's how you know it matters." She didn't reply, not right away. Instead, her hand shifted beneath the blanket until her fingers laced quietly with mine. The small movement made my chest ache in the best way, as if that one gesture was her answer. We stayed like that for a long time, the storm now just a memory outside, the candlelight soft around us. And in the quiet, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of the silence, not of the closeness, not of what might come next. Because for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Morning came quietly. The storm had passed in the night, leaving the world washed clean. Sunlight spilled across her living room in soft, golden streaks, catching on the glass of the empty wine bottle and the half-burned candles. It felt like the house itself had exhaled, lighter, calmer, and so had I. I woke to the faint sound of movement from the kitchen. The couch blanket was still draped around my shoulders, a reminder of the night before. For a moment, I sat there, grounding myself in the memory of it, her head resting against me, her hand holding mine, the silence that had said more than words ever could. When I followed the smell of coffee into the kitchen, I found her standing by the counter, hair tied up loosely, a soft robe wrapped around her. She looked different in the daylight, not less beautiful, but more real. Less composed, more human. And somehow, that made my chest ache in the best way. She turned when she heard me, smiling in a way that was gentle, almost shy. "Good morning." I leaned against the doorway, taking her in. "Good morning," I echoed, my voice still rough from sleep. She poured 2 mugs of coffee and handed one to me. Our fingers brushed again, and like every other time before, it lingered longer than it needed to. We sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, steam rising between us, sunlight warming the space. For a while, we just drank in silence. And it was a good silence. The kind that didn't feel like absence but presence, 2 people simply existing together. After a sip, she looked at me with that same playfulness I had first noticed on her porch, but now softened by everything we'd shared. She lifted her cup slightly, almost like a toast. "You know," she said, her voice light but her eyes holding mine, "wine gets better with age." I smiled, remembering the first night she'd said it. But before I could reply, she leaned just a little closer, her tone quieting, deepening. "And maybe," she added, "so do connections." Her words hung there between us, not heavy, not uncertain, just true. I clinked my cup gently against hers, the faint sound ringing like a quiet promise. "Then maybe this is only the beginning," I said. Her smile deepened, not the polite one she'd given me the first night, not the careful one she wore when she was guarding herself. This one was different. Open. Warm. Real. We didn't need to rush it. There were no declarations, no grand gestures. Just two people, sitting in the soft light of morning, sharing coffee and the quiet understanding that something had begun, something worth waiting for, worth growing into, like wine that only grows richer with time. And as I sat there across from her, I knew that whatever this was, however slow it moved, it was already enough. More than enough. If this story touched you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more slow burn romances. And if you've ever experienced a connection that felt unexpected but unforgettable, share it in the comments. I'd love to hear your story too.